Good morning, reading room. I'm having so much fun coming back to this. I'm so happy I came back to the classroom. And so thank you, my sons, for getting me in a place where I have internet and I can do this then. They were trying to block me and still are trying to block me in many ways. But, we've got God on our side, even if we were once Catholic. I do have to say, it was the Protestants that brought all of this slander to our Easter holiday, and it is holy. It is a holy day today, which I recognize, and it is Holy Week. And sometimes our lives are going in such crazy directions that we forget, and I forgot. I was like, I knew it was actually Easter, and I knew it was Passover last Sunday. Although they didn't talk about it but that was because they're using my stuff, so whatever. Probably at the same time, I mean, they did mention Passover, but it was Passover, and I'm happy I'm back, and I'm happy I'm doing this, being Catholics now, for sure. We are coming back to Gabriel Byrne after I just was totally burnt out. I'm sure I made that joke before, at Butler, who looks like that evangelical guy who supposedly died, but I don't know who dies, but I'm not sure. But he was that evangelical guy married to that beautiful woman who's on that network that they've got, Discovery, Star, whatever, network, something like that. Sounds like a whole lot of product going on there. Gabriel Byrne, born May 12th, 1950, is an acclaimed actor, writer, producer, and social justice activist. His extensive filmography includes The Usual Suspects, Little Women, Ghost Ship, Spider, Vanity Fair, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, I think that's how you would say that, and Emotional Arithmetic. Byrne is no longer a practicing Catholic. And there's his picture. Neither am I. I haven't practiced in a long, long time, and I have no intention to. I have a very conflicted attitude about the church. I come from a background where people believe that having a priest in the family is the greatest blessing God can bestow. It's an Irish badge of honor. The Irish had supplied Africa and the Far East with so many missionaries. At church, there was a little collection box for the missionaries in Africa with a little black boy, and you put a coin and he'd nod his head in thanks. One never knew where the money was going and why it was being collected, but we just assumed, like everything else, it was the right thing to do. My faith at the time was the faith of a child, which doesn't have logic. I don't know if logic and faith are actually compatible. To have faith, you have to, in a way, deny logic. I think my faith was mixed up with the notion of home and security. I didn't have a very stable home life, so the church provided me with that. All the questions that I had were answered there, and I didn't have to ask many complicated questions of myself or the world around me. If I suffered in this world, I'd go to heaven. If I did this, it was a sin. Things were very clear cut. I went away at 12 to be a priest, and I left the seminary when I was 17. I'm no longer a practicing Catholic. I don't practice any form of institutionalized religion. Looking back, I recognize joining the seminary was part of a desire to escape from the world, a world that some days seemed unbearable. It was a shelter from the storm, a very seductive idea. I didn't realize how much the theater and the church influence each other and how close they are in terms of what they provide to people. I went to church the other day in Brooklyn, not expecting to feel anything, but I've always gone into a church to sit for a few minutes and try to connect with something greater than myself. I realize that the church captures silence brilliantly. Most churches enshrine or encapsulate the silence. Silence forces you to come into contact with yourself. You can be walking on the street and thinking, but there is nothing quite like suddenly being in a hushed, silent building. The church understood and still does the power of silence. If you look at the architectural mechanics of the church, it's just like the theater. You have the seats, the audience, the stage, the main actors, the theatrical effects like the candles, the flowers, and you have the incense. There is a lot of pagantry, and a lot of deep understanding of the effect on the deepest emotions, and that's psychology. Some say the light from the stained glass produces an effect that is extremely calming and uplifting, psychology. Incense inhaled produces a feeling of relaxation, psychology. Candlelight brings everything into dramatic relief, psychology. These things are not accidents, so the connection between the theater and church is, to me, very obvious and very powerful. But that doesn't mean that those were the reasons that those things were developed. Psychology developed after those things. And I'm only drawing my own analogies. This is nothing that he has said or, even what I would believe anything about psychology being behind this, but that's what he's sort of intimating, right? But it's not just that the psychology is accurate about maybe stained glass, likely, candlelight, likely for sure, amongst other things. Candlelight can probably also emit some other thoughts for people, including Catholic Church, which may or may not have positive emotions that go along with it, right? But stained glass was not developed for a calming effect on the churchgoers that I can see. Candlelight in the church wasn't developed for dramatic relief, right? In the church it probably gives dramatic relief, solace. Anyway, let's continue. Faith to me is a decision to believe despite evidence to the contrary. It's a brave thing to do. One becomes an active participant in the world when he or she believes in something. Faith, optimism, and hope. We have to have those things as human beings. Otherwise, life makes no sense whatsoever. Life is unbearable because there is nothing that we can see beyond ourselves. On the other hand, I do understand that realistic view of the world, the rejection of faith, the rejection of God. There are people who see faith and religious exercise as being merely the mechanics of following a huge fairy tale, and that actually there is nothing after this. There is nothing really before this. There is just what there is. That's what it seems like Butler, it was actually professing, right? That going through the mechanics, people of faith who see religion and faith as an exercise in mechanics. And as an exercise in mechanics, they might as well make the most out of it. So truly, that's what I heard, is that he knows Frank Butler knows nothing about faith, knows nothing about sacrifice or poverty or any of those things. All he knows about, which is why he moved to the evangelical church under a different name. What was his name? It's Daystar. That's Daystar guy. Looks just like Daystar guy. Anywho, I suffered in my early childhood and in my adolescence at the hands of people who aren't equipped to be representatives of the ideal of Christianity, as we all have. I'm sorry to say, Mr. Byrne. I don't believe that celibacy contributes any more to the well-being of the Catholic Church, and I don't think Christ came down to earth to say that man should be celibate. I think that there are definite positive outcomes of being celibate. The first and foremost being that you aren't hurting people in the name of love making, which is what it's supposed to be. Not just proliferation. Actually, the church hierarchy introduced celibacy as a purely utilitarian. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sort of celibate in the boundaries of marriage. No, we don't want celibacy in the boundaries of marriage. I've done this before as well. Oh my gosh, this is a flashback. What am I talking about? Monogamy. Sorry. I believe you, yeah. Actually, the church hierarchy introduced celibacy as a purely utilitarian function so that they would have to pay the dependence of the priests who get women pregnant. Now, I have heard that priests are celibate in order to focus their attention on the church because they are a father of the church, the entire church, not a and if you have a father of family, you become, that family becomes dependent on you, and there is a obligated and necessary relationship that becomes above the rest of the church. I think that really makes more sense than what he's saying here about women being pregnant. They invented a notion of celibacy, which I regard as a sin against human life because it denies the one thing that is God-given, the need, the blessed urge to procreate life. To deny that is to deny the humanity of people, and to institutionalize celibacy makes the sin even greater. You know, we are all supposed to be celibate until marriage, and certainly a discipline like that does not have to be simply for those who are unmarried, right? It can continue on in certain choices in life. I can't, sometimes when I talk about it, I can't criticize it. It was a choice that you made, and you understood the choice that you were making, and that choice had to do with the fact that you are serving the entire church and not one family above the entire church, right? The Episcopalian, the Protestant, and the Anglican religions all survive with man being married, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with a woman being involved in the life of a man whose job it is to be the pastor of his flock. That's true, and she could do that, and that's absolutely true. I know, I remember reading this, vacillating back and forth. Now I'm on the pure other side. Yeah, it'd be nice to have a family to help support you, knowing that you are devoted to the church, right? Which is very hard. As a result of that denial of the human urge to procreate and have a loving relationship with another human being, you pervert that instinct, and a lot of people who are in the church in positions of responsibility and power become debased and affected in a negative way. Yeah, they're perverted their instinct, but you know, again, we can't have self-control. That is not the biggest, most impossibility for self-control. Only if you introduce things like pornography does it become an impossibility for self-control. And sex, right? And if you begin to have sex, right? But not with yourself. I don't think that includes that. I think that is a definite strategy for being not the fantasy part though, right? Not the fantasy part. You have to be careful about the fantasy part, but certainly keeps people from being promiscuous in my mind. But that's as a woman, and a woman who is celibate, and a woman who does believe in monogamy. And I also believe in trying to be celibate until marriage. I do, because I think values change all of a sudden. A guy's values in particular. Huh? What? That's all it was? What? Yeah, basically, no tricks. I'm not a gymnast. Where does their sexual urge go? You put a man in charge of 40 boys, and it's actually okay for him to be sexually free with the young boys and not okay for him to be with a woman. As Well, no, it's not okay for them to be free with young boys. Yeah. As long as celibacy survives, people will be drawn to the priesthood for all the wrong reasons. People who are totally unsuited to the priesthood enter into it. They're institutionalized, and as a result, people like me suffer. I was sexually abused. Right there, to me, is the reason my eyes, when I came back, dropped down and I saw that line, so I was prepared to say this and make this association. That's the reason why you can't understand where a priest's sexual urges go. But that's the reason why many priests can't get rid of their sexual urges as well. I wrote about what happened in a magazine in Ireland some years ago. Actually, it was a letter of forgiveness to this man who'd abused me. Nobody mentioned the article ever. They didn't come up and say, it happened to me too. Thanks for saying this, or I know what you went through. I think there is a certain amount of shame in it, and people think, let's just ignore it. So after I'd written the piece, I was left with the feeling that I'd stood up in front of the class and said what happened to me, and that I was greeted with total silence and then told to sit down. That happened to me when I talked about my husband's potential sexual abuse. I don't know that he was for sure. There were so many secrets, as there still are now, around all of this media attention that I can't really be sure. I know that there are just lies, lies, lies in order to manipulate me and my career and the things that I'm saying by the medical community and Big Ag and the FDA. Then, of course, you feel another sense of maybe I shouldn't have said that or written that. The letter was an attempt to try to find the humanity of the man and to try to understand the world that created him by celibacy, by him being institutionalized, by the silence code of the church and the way they treated it. Do you see what he's saying? He's saying that all of a sudden you think you know my character. Because I'm a Catholic person who's been abused, you think you know who I am. That's what he's saying. And to try and understand the world that created him by celibacy, by him being institutionalized, by the silence code of the church and the way they treated it. It was an attempt to understand that world and my place as an innocent kid in it. Was he really to blame, or was the church and the society that produced him to blame as well? I hadn't thought of it for a long time. Then one day I met him at a football match, and he recognized me from films and said hello. I looked at him. He didn't know that I knew him or what I knew about him. He didn't make that connection, but I of course did. He was a man who was obviously used to living alone with hair grown over his ears, an uncared for man in a beret shouting at the football field the things that he used to shout at us. Harder, drive it, drive it. I tracked him down to this nursing home, and I called him and asked if he remembered me. He asked me what my name was and said, no, I don't remember anybody with that name. And then at the end of a long pause, he said, did you used to sit in the front row? I said, yes. I was really good at Latin. You used to call me, and then he says, G. That was your nickname for me. I told him I was really good in Latin because I wanted him to think I was a really good student. I liked that he liked me. He gave me encouragement. He was nice to me, and then he repeated, what is your name? I told him my name, and he said that it couldn't be true because he only knows one man with that name, and he's a film star. I said, that is me. And there was another long silence, and he said, I'm talking to Gabriel Byrne, the film star. Why did you call on me? I couldn't say anything. I really could not say what I had to say. That's not a surprise to me. There have been times in my life where I felt like I needed to say things, and I just didn't have the words to say. And I'm an outspoken person, so that doesn't happen a lot. It does happen, though, when I'm not sure of my judgment and just exactly what he said. Was he really to blame, or was the church and the society that produced him to blame as well? You don't know where that comes from. You don't know what you understood and what you misunderstood. And so in that way, I think that that is a really human response. I really could not say what I had to say. What I remembered more than anything else was that, and especially here, you're taking him off guard. He's not even strikingly embarrassed. So you are, and this is authentic from the priest, I'm quite certain. I don't think it's calculated. And all of these put the doubt in people's mind about the sincerity of their offense, right? What I remember more than anything else was that he had a very kind voice, a very gentle voice. And as a young kid who lived in an unstable background, an older person with a very kind voice was shelter from the storm. Here I was after all these years, and there was still a part of me saying, this man has a gentle voice. That's what I just said about the eyes of my pastor. Not just said it. I said about the eyes of my pastor, which I have called into question because he's never stood up and questioned and helped me along. So that is really a peculiar characteristic of the evangelical pastors of avoiding real experience of their congregation, avoiding the conversation of real experiences of their conversation. Although he had warm eyes, I said. So that's always confusing. And then I just sent my son a picture of somebody who was a professor, and this is something that I'm questioning about that I believe happened a long time ago, but it's hard to mix. I mean, it's easy to mix memories with what you see and with what you read and all kinds of things. But I do believe that I had a professor who said the only way for me to get a good grade in his class was to sleep with him. And if I were to equate that to some of the things I've been seeing, this is a person who has warm eyes, that I've known to have warm eyes. And referred to himself as God. But an atheist, a pure atheist, a pure, when hell freezes over, I'll believe. And I think calls himself God and probably may have been sexually abused and acts out in ways that would produce a victim. I thought I'd be angry. I thought I'd be upset, but I wasn't. I just asked myself, where'd my anger go? Where'd my hurt and disappointment go? I know where it went. It went deep inside me, and yet I couldn't confront him. I later heard he died in his sleep. That doesn't that sound like Edgar Allan Poe? Edgar Allan Poe, The Telltale Heart? But here's the thing about what he just said that I think is very wrong. I know where it went deep inside me. Yeah, that's a possibility. You would only know that if you conjure it up occasionally to make sure it's there deep inside you. To me, that was grace. God gave you the ability to forgive. And the fact that you turned it into something that went deep inside you is a psychological technique, rumination, to recall negative adverse events. And that is psychological poison. But I have had the ability of making things disappear from my mind if they're unnecessary and they've left me with the feeling of no control, like rape, right? I don't know. Maybe I wasn't raped. I don't know. I know I was drugged. I know I was drugged numerous times, right? And I know that people had doubts about why I would go back to why would you have that? I've told you, why would you allow that in the community? Now you're going to see. Now you're going to see what you've allowed. You son of a bitches, you. But see, that's where you call it up, and that's a choice. Just like the faith is a choice. I don't have to call it up. Or I could know my limitations in order to call those things up in healthy ways, and also know that my understanding of that event is short. It just is. What would I have except for the video that they produced on every move I made? Because it's the great part of the great experiment, isn't it? It makes you think about life, that somebody who really deserves life dies in great pain, and somebody who deserves to die in great pain goes in their sleep. See, that's a decision too. What did I think? I thought the treachery of Telltale Heart, and you thought you get to go in your sleep. Although, on the other hand, it's not that I haven't thought of those things as well, right? I'm pretty sure that crossed my mind somewhere. What's God's purpose in that? People abuse, they don't get caught, they die quietly. People do incredibly great things for people and they die violently. There is no justice. It's kind of a myth to believe that the universe is somehow a place of order, that if you do this, then that'll happen. It is a place of order. If you plant a seed, a tree will grow. Given other factors, it's not the only factor, but yeah, no, you can. There is order in that tree growing process. So there is order. What you're suggesting is there is order and justice, and there's only order and justice by choices that people make to produce order and justice. That is free will, folks, and that is what we are looking at on Judgment Day. That's what we're looking at on Judgment Day. What did you do with your free will? I tried to forgive him. Oh, God gave you the grace just a few paragraphs ago. You didn't even have to try. What you had to do was you had to stop recalling. That piece I wrote is because deep down, I feel that I've forgiven. I probably haven't, but the nature of forgiveness is that you have to take the action to forgive, and ultimately one hopes that real forgiveness will come from it. It did. You just passed it by like a ship in the night. I saw him as a man trapped by ignorance, the institution, bigger players, and his family. A man who should have been married, or a man who should have been gay. He shouldn't have been in a room living by himself or with other men teaching children. You should have stopped. A man being trapped by ignorance, the institution, but that's not what you recalled. Then you kept going. I remember at 5 years of age, right here, he keeps going. That's why he couldn't forgive. God gave him the great grace 3 paragraphs before. I remember at 5 years of age being told that if I did something wrong, which could have been as banal as eating sweets before dinner, I'd burn in hell physically for eternity. Well, now you've got abusive parents besides, and that's the reason why you couldn't let go and find the grace of God and forgiveness, Mr. Byrne. At that age, to be thinking that if you did something bad, you'd burn in hell, forget about enjoying life as a kid. Take your 5-year-old head and try to understand the notion of eternity. I threw that notion away. I knew God knew what was on our hearts. I knew he knew intention. How could even a child's idea of intention be so perverted that God would be so punitive? That comes from learning. I remember a nun in front of the classroom striking a match and putting the match to her finger. We were all dumbstruck. We were 6 or 7 at the time, and she said, "My finger is like your soul, and the flame is like the flames of hell, and that is how your soul burns for all time." Psycho! There was a huge difference. I don't even understand that, although I do remember my dad putting my son's hand to a flame and trying to teach him something. And he was a baby, and I was so mad at him. I didn't think that he would be able to feel the flame, but it started making him cry. I was so mad at my dad. What the fuck is the matter with you? Honest to God. I'm not saying that you didn't do right things by us, and maybe you did protect us from mama, and maybe also in your elderly age you really did think that she was trying to kill you, and maybe she was. I see she came from an Italian family that looks like mafia all over the place, given the few relatives I know of hers, right? and the way she called them in, like organized criminals, given a dog whistle. I get it. Now, but how could I have gotten it back then? And don't think I still don't think that I still don't think that I'm the fall guy. And what did you have to do with that? There was a huge difference between that kind of perverted Catholicism and the ideas of Christianity. I'm not passing on Catholicism to my kids. I'm not passing on any form of institutionalized religion. Then they'll never find God. You have to give them some ideas. Institutionalized religion, okay. But I did. I sent my kids to Catholic school even after all of that. But don't think I didn't forewarn them. Don't think I didn't have eyes all over the place for what was going on. And my husband too. I think we're pretty good with eyes. I think that the world of religion and the world of spirituality are two different things. What I pass on to them, I hope, is what I believe to be the crux of Christianity, which is love thy neighbor as thyself. Not if you can't forgive, dude. Contained in that is a recipe for some kind of definition of happiness. Forgiveness. What my Catholicism taught me was to deny who I was, to change who you were, to denigrate it, to be ashamed of it, to change who you were, denigrate it, to be ashamed of it, to not acknowledge it, and to not love myself. The Catholic Church has been guilty of not loving other people, and when church and state get into bed together and the ideals of Christianity are used in the pursuit of the political, monetary, and worldly ends, that is a denial of Christianity. Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what we are supposed to be about. Really, the fundamentals of Christianity, military, and we are not seeing that. We're not seeing those fundamentals. It sure felt like something touched my foot. I believe in principles of Christianity, but also in the principles of Judaism, and they contain the same message. Well, yeah. I don't believe in the afterlife. I don't believe in a God. I don't believe that we live in a world of order. Then you don't believe in trees. Then you don't believe that there are real causes and effects. If you don't believe in any cause effect. That is a symptom of, Mr. Byrne, that's a symptom of helplessness. You should see my videos on helplessness. I have a lot of them. I believe we live in a world of chaos, and the institutions we brought to bear to prevent that chaos from becoming all enveloping our law, religion, and education. They give you an illusion that you can control chaos, but actually every single day there are instances that chaos is the norm and not order. Yes, there are, absolutely, in human behavior, which is unpredictable until you collect millions of bits of data. I don't believe that there is necessarily a cosmic consequence to action. All right, cosmic, yes. Consequence, there are. Paris and Rome are built on violence and blood. At the heart of beauty is something dark. Yeats said it, which is a great line. A pity beyond all telling is hid in the heart of love. No, that's hidden in the heart of hate. That's not the definition of love, not one single bit. Read your Bible. So true, you cannot love without the knowledge of loss. When I think of spirituality, I think of the things of the spirit. I believe in the spirit of a human being. I believe in good spirits, the soul, for want of a better description of a human being. And see, they can't believe that God is a good spirit and allow all this. It's man who did that. You perverted. You did not recognize the perversions, and nor did you forgive, based on the fact that this can happen from our institutions, and then you did nothing about it. Faith is a very personal decision. I envy people who have it. It may be our only purpose that we don't know. Not knowing might be the only thing that makes sense in this world. When you look at what you do for a living, you have to say, this is what I do. How can I use what I do in some way, not to change the world, but at least to raise awareness? Yeah, you set your bar too low. Sorry. Okay, we are not going to get to Susan Sarandon. And I can't remember how I felt about Susan Sarandon's. I thought I liked it because I like Susan Sarandon, but I also stopped. I didn't like her as much, so I think I might not have liked it. Come back on Tuesday after 4 days off and contemplate, does she like Susan Sarandon's excerpt in Being Catholic Now by Kerry Kennedy. What a great book. What a great book to sit back and talk about all family kinds of things that you can have a discussion about. I think I tried that at the family table, and then that's the reason why I went here to people who listen. Oh, well, how many viewers? 0? Last time I had 0 views, but I had a view duration. So I don't know how you have a view duration and 0 views. Hackers! Just a bunch of hackers. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. We are off for 4 days after we have been on for a jam-packed 3 days, which really only amounts to 1.5 days now. I'm on half days, folks, and I'm loving it. Guess what has returned? Makeup and my sense of humor. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. I will see you next week. This is Holy Week. I hope that you are contemplating the things that you believe in that are really beyond yourself. And whether or not, Mr. Byrne, you are taking the things that you believe in and really degrading them into something that they are not because you have had some bad experiences. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you on Tuesday.